Okay.
Welcome, everybody, to our industry update this month. I'm Jill Cox with Heritage Title Company. I want to start with a kind of a brief introduction of Brian. Brian joined the Colorado Association of Realtors last summer. Is that right, Brian? Been there
Correct.
for
Actually, middle of the session last year. I joined like March
oh,
1st and was thrown right to the fire immediately. So no better way to learn than middle of the session, switching gears.
absolutely. Jumped right into it. I do want to share kind of a bit of your background since you're a little bit newer to CAR. So, Brian Tanner is the Vice President of Public Policy for the Colorado Association of Realtors. He's a seasoned political strategist and lobbyist with more than 20 years of experience in Colorado, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, and Oregon. He has served as the Colorado Association of Realtors Vice President of Public Policy since last spring, as we just talked about. In this capacity, Brian oversees the CAR government affairs team, including lobbying, political fundraising, state ballot issues, and candidate campaigns. He has worked on multi-million dollar statewide ballot measure campaigns, presidential and congressional candidate races, down to school board and other local elections. Before joining CAR, Brian served as the political director for nearly 40,000 educators at the Colorado Education Association for 8 years and multiple statewide associations before CEA. So what an impressive background you have, and we're so fortunate to have you representing realtors here in the state of Colorado. So I don't want to hold up what everybody is here to see. So I want to turn things over to you, and we're looking forward to your update. Thanks again for your time today.
Appreciate that, Jill. And again, I appreciate everybody taking time out to hear me chat about some of the things coming out of the 2024 legislative session. First, I have to humanize myself a little bit more in terms of that as well. Just want to acknowledge that we've got some pretty crazy wildfires across the Front Range and across the state out there. I can relate. Actually, after college, it made sense with my political science degree from the University of Oregon to go get certified to be an FF2 wildland firefighter. So it is something that I spent 7 months based out of Bend, Oregon. Nothing fancy, not a hot shot, not a smoke jumper, was on a hand crew with a lot of these firefighters doing right now, grueling work to dig fire line for containment. So just want to acknowledge and give props to our firefighters out there where it is very hot and tough work, but it makes a huge difference for our communities out there. And again, obviously, we're always shooting for no structure loss, no life loss, no injuries out there. But because again, it damages the market, it damages communities and individual lives. So that's another fun fact about me. I actually use what I learned as a wildland firefighter. You give fire orders, and one of them is like, be alert, think clearly, act decisively, be calm. And it applies absolutely to the chaos that is under the dome. So, and I'm gonna give some props as well, and I'll share those here shortly, but I want to share my screen and kind of dig into, again, hopefully everyone can see that. Jill, Damian, thumbs up.
Yep,
Good. All
looks
right.
good.
So look, politics is a team sport, and we'll get into this. And we have a fantastic government affairs team at CAR. So Carrie Ann Brazell is our most senior staffer, having been with us for 3 years now. Jesse Zamora is our GAD. Again, Carrie Ann's all things RPAC. Lauren Cecil, who we basically were able to pull away from Tennessee Realtors, is our senior GAD, or Government Affairs Director. And then I want to acknowledge Jay Brown. Jay Brown is on the Leadership Council for CAR. He is a realtor. If you have any concerns or issues with this presentation, please direct those right to Jay. Jay's not here, but I'm sure he'll appreciate that.
I'm sure he's gonna love that. He's gonna love that. I'll let him know.
Like, I'd always do this to him as well, being like, Jay Brown is your go-to for any sort of commentary, good, bad, indifferent. He'll take those pieces out there. I do want to set the stage, and we'll talk about some of our partnerships here in a bit, but I want to set the stage about things that we will cover and things we won't cover. So if folks are here today to hear me as a continuation of something that Damian's talked about a little bit, or Scott Peterson around some of the MLS practice changes or contracts or forms, I apologize, you're going to be disappointed because that is not something that I'm going to cover. We do
I don't know why in the world they would want to hear more about that, Brian, but hey, it's a nice break from what they get to deal with for the next 2 weeks.
Absolutely. And again, Damian, I'm sure, again, a million questions. I might be close to that on some of the other Zooms and webinars we've hosted about some of the changes. But this time together right now is not going to be about that. It's going to be about really more around statewide policy and legislative action. And we'll talk a little bit about what might be coming forward on the ballot. So
Hey,
that's
Brian,
gonna be,
real quick, a couple people are asking if you're going to be sharing this presentation afterwards. Are you comfortable with that?
yeah, I'm comfortable
Okay,
sharing
great.
the slide deck that I shared with you. So people can. Now, I will say this, there are things in here that I would love to keep in the family. So if people want to share this with colleagues and coworkers, that's great. This isn't something that, you know, it wouldn't be the worst thing. There's nothing in here that's not transparent and public out there. But obviously, we can have a more candid conversation when we're talking kind of among friends and colleagues in terms of the work dynamics out there. So that would be my one ask is, as much as people want to post on social media, like, again, that's fine. I would encourage it to be shared directly with friends versus the shotgun approach of far and wide.
Yeah. Let's keep it with people that have aligned perspectives.
Yeah. All right. So again, I'm sorry, I got to tee it up a little bit more than what I just shared before I start flipping through screens here. Again, so we're not going to talk about contracts, forms, and MLS practice changes. Feel free to reach out to Damian or Scott or legal, or go to coloradorealtors.com. We have a page devoted to some of the information out there, and there's recordings of some of the Zooms talking about those pieces. What we are going to talk about is political composition. It's a starting point. And the importance and reality of political math. So if you love or hate math, we're gonna go through some numbers because it's kind of a driving force. I love math. Before I did political science, I was a chemical engineer and did that for 2 years. So statics, strengths, dynamics, multivariable calculus, all of those fun classes became my electives as I went from hard science to liberal arts. So math is a driving force of the work we do. We're going to talk about 2024 legislation, snapshot, issues covered, what we're doing about the political composition, what you all can do, which is going to be a huge piece there, and then we'll get into Q&A. So Jill, I would definitely ask, as I don't have the chat up, if questions pop up, happy to take them in live time. But again, as you can see on your screen here, there's about 13 slides that we're looking to get through in our time together. All right. So moving along, this is the starting point for all the work we do. So we can talk about the coulda, woulda, shoulda, what we would like to see the world look like. This is our political reality, right? So again, those of you that are on this this Zoom or webinar, some of you, about a third of you are going to love these numbers based upon our makeup of Colorado. A third of you are going to hate these numbers. And the largest block of you is going to be like, meh, I don't care. I'm unaffiliated. It doesn't matter who's in power. I'm more concerned about policy pieces out there. But again, 46 Democrats and 19 Republicans in the House. That is a super majority. On the Senate, you've got 23 Democrats and 12 Republicans. That is 1 seat short of a supermajority. Now, the things that people are like, why does that really matter, Brian? Well, again, the legislature can refer ballot measures. And if either party or whoever has a supermajority in both chambers, they can actually refer constitutional measures. Right now, it's statutory. So they can refer statutory. Last year, we had Prop HH that was referred by the legislature. Anytime you see a amendment or proposition that has letters attached to it, it has been referred by the legislature. It's when you see numbers is when it's a citizen initiative. So it's kind of an important sort of political piece because the Blue Book, when we get it here in probably about 6 weeks or so, 7 weeks, is going to be thick. Most likely. There's a good chance it's a presidential year. There's going to be probably a number of ballot measures out there. So again, Matt, I'm also going to leave you with 3 numbers. Now, if we were in person, I could do this. I could see a show of hands out there. But I'm going to leave you 3 numbers that are really super critical about this. It ties into the team sport politics of this all. 33, 18, and 1. And I'm sure some of you are like, those are 3 random numbers, Brian. Like, can you tell us more? 33 is the number of votes to pass something in the House. 18 is the magic number to pass something in the Senate. And you need the governor. There is a pocket passage, but more times than not, you need Governor Polis to be willing to pass a bill as well. So right there, one legislator cannot just get a bill passed by themselves. They need a team. And we'll get into the team dynamics because it affected our political strategy and the bills that we worked on kind of around that piece. So
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, when you have these super majorities, and this is not meant to be political, but you definitely get partisan politics that play a heavy hand, and there's not as much moderation as you would like to see when it's not the super majority. When he says 33 in the House, you see they don't even need 13 Dems to pass stuff anymore. When he says 18 in the Senate, you don't need 5 Dems to pass stuff that could be really very far left. And frankly, this goes the same in other states where it's pure Republican legislatures. I'm not saying that because I'm not trying to be political here, where they have the same problem. And from my perspective, I love purple, but I don't know if we're ever going to see purple again. So anyways, I'm sorry. I just thought I'd throw in my personal opinion that maybe half the people hate. So there you go.
again, political reality. Like this is what it is. And again, love it or hate it, like we have to operate in that. It's just the way it is. These people are making decisions with whether we like it or not. And we're trying to get good outcomes, good policy that is beneficial to the real estate industry, businesses, people's work and lives. That is the outcome that we're shooting for. So this is where I share with all of you that I hope you've cleared your calendar, because we're gonna go through all 97 bills out of the 705. So again, strap in, get a drink, whatever you need. I'm kidding. We will cover just a handful of these. But I want to talk about that. Again, 705 introduced this year. It's a little more than last session, but it's kind of on par. 97 is, there's about 100 bills that kind of touch us in some way, shape, or form. So real estate, license, the industry as a whole, housing, there's a whole things, water, we've got taxation. There's all sorts of components that we sort of work on there. So I'm going to touch on a few of these. The piece that I think is really important for all of this is when we talk about positions, like the Colorado Association of Realtors took a position on a bill. As much as I would love to have that power and wave a magic wand and being like, we like this bill, we hate that bill, we need to change that bill. It is not me. It is a group of about 45 realtors with actually another 15, 20. So there's about 60 realtors from 22 different associations across the entire state that come together regularly on a weekly basis to go through bills. And then bi-weekly, they actually come together to vote and take official positions on that. As a staff person, as everybody on my team, we execute those decisions. We do not make them. So we get the guidance from practitioners in the field as to how things would impact them. And then our job is to go out and make things happen. So just know it's a beautiful part. It is sometimes very messy. There's a lot of conversations, but it is a beautiful part of having practitioners make decisions affecting the industry and affecting realtors across the state.
Yeah, and they don't take that lightly. I mean, the work that they put into that committee is unbelievable. I mean, I've sat in several of those meetings, and I mean, and it's just not just meetings they go to. They spend I just can't believe the amount of time that those guys spend looking out for the industry.
And Damian, this is the other part too, where I think we have done a much better job. So Damian is our representative on the Colorado Bar Association, the real estate section. And Damian, as you can attest, you got quite a few emails from me to you and Scott, be like, hey, can you run this by the real estate section as to the impact? Because there was a ton of things that had punitive or legal ramifications with a lot of gray area.
Yeah, with a lot of that stuff in the landlord tenant, we did a lot of stuff on, and yeah.
Which is great. That is the other thing too. As CAR, as the Realtor Association for the state, we don't operate in a vacuum. We have a whole host of partners. So the Bar Association, Real Estate Section, Division of Real Estate, home builders. There's about 12 different coalitions that we are a part of to get a broader sense of whether it's a business community, chambers of commerce, local governments, other people in the development, building space. There's a host of folks that we sort of reach out to who may have more expertise on an issue than what we're bringing to the table. So that's the plug. Legislative Policy Committee is, like, again, that position-taking body. So this is important too, because people ask all the time, like, when we talk about positions, there are 4 positions I want to leave you with. Again, support's really simple. We like this bill, please pass it and make it happen as law. We oppose a bill, and this is a terrible, no good, very bad bill. Please just make it go away. The phrase that you will hear in the legislature, at least for Colorado, is postpone indefinitely. It's like, we're not going to kill it and defeat it. We will just postpone it until it dies on the calendar at some far off date beyond the end of session. And that's a nice way, a very polite, gentle way of killing a bill. We talk about monitoring or track. Actually, monitoring is the official phrase. So we monitor a bill. It doesn't mean it just sits there. It means it could impact us. It doesn't have a significant bearing. We don't need to actively engage on the bill, but it could be amended. It could change to where it further impact us. So we track it, we monitor it to make sure that nothing changes about it, or there's other groups that are taking the lead in terms of that piece. We just don't actively are doing something about it. One of the positions that I would say we've really, in the last 2 years since I joined CAR, is amending bills. And this is where I'm going to touch a little bit on the political math of these pieces. So amending is when a bill, it needs to change. And I will just share with you, more times than not, we take an amendment position on a bill that we would likely oppose if the political composition was maybe a little bit different. And there's a lot of people who I would say are red in the face as like, how on earth can you not just oppose this bill? It's horrible. We always count like pathways to defeating a bill. So on some of the bills, and I'll give some examples here, there's a good case study of a bill. If there's not a pathway to, again, knock the number down below 33, 18, or get the governor to veto, then we've got to make sure that we mitigate and do some damage control on bad bills. And we did that on a whole host of bills last year and again this year, where some of these things passed. But I'm going to show you on a slide about where it was introduced and where it ended up. And that's where the amend position comes powerful.
Yeah, and to be clear, that means it was going to pass either way. So the best you could hope for was to make it less bad.
Yeah. This is actually back to the math. So again, hopefully you've got pen and paper, you've got your calculator out there. So the big number I showed you at the beginning of the House, 4619. When it gets to the committee level, you're talking 9 Democrats and 4 Republicans, or maybe 8 Democrats and 3 Republicans. If we wanted to defeat a bill in committee, the starting point, or amend it, you would have to pull off on a 9-4 committee. You got to pull 3 Democrats to join every Republican to get to the magical majority of 7 in that subcommittee. And that's highly unlikely, just to be candid with you. We have found that we had more success working with the bill sponsor, especially if they're a Democrat, to get amendments to change it, rather than trying to do a hostile end run to get people from their caucus to join Republicans to team up. Because those people would have bills of their own, and they would like to see their bills passed. And so that's part of the political strategy in terms of the numbers and why we engaged on the amendment process far more than I think we ever have before me. And so I've had some historians of CAR share that it is true. We've been in amendment position in the last 2 years, far more than we have been in the last probably 20 years. So that's the math behind in terms of like, is there a pathway to get to the majority to make a change or to defeat something out there? So again, big bucket issues, and we'll dive into tenant landlord issues again. There's a lot of, again, every year there seems to be more out there. I will say this, we did such a good job last year around rent control. It did not pop up directly again. It is a bill that was our #1 priority to defeat a year ago in terms of just damaging the market. And it didn't come up in a direct capacity this year. The other one too.
Isn't that being I mean, it looks like that the Biden-Harris might be looking at doing something on the federal level, from what I've seen, which has a whole host of issues in Colorado if that ever passes. But I guess you get to punt that one to NAR to try and take care of.
Absolutely true. And look, this is actually where I'm going to give Governor Polis a shout out, because Jared Polis, there's 2 Twitter handles for those of you on X or Twitter. There's Governor Polis, and then there's Jared Polis. And Jared Polis responded that that is not a good idea when the Biden administration came out with a national sort of rent control about how it would hurt the market. And so it's out there. So again, if you're looking for @Jared Polis, you will see a tweet from a couple of weeks ago now, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, saying that that was something that would not be welcome in Colorado, which I want to give a shout out, because again, Governor Polis has actually been a very good partner especially behind the scenes in terms of working on these bills. So whether it's amendments or whether it's, pathway, but I do want to acknowledge the governor's office who have at least been upfront with us and have told us if they're willing to engage and where they're not, which hasn't always been the case with even legislators or some governors. Wildfire insurance. You all know this. This is something that will continue to be an ongoing. The Division of Insurance is doing, again, stakeholder meetings around property insurance. What can we do? Because we're seeing private insurers pulling out of zip codes and markets, which wreaks havoc. It wreaks havoc with the market. We have these fantastic properties in these great communities, but if we don't have insurers covering it, as everybody knows here, you're not going to get lending for it.
Yeah, and the HOAs are taking the biggest beating because they're not even able to get insurance. I mean, it's crazy. They're having to put huge deductibles down just to get covered.
And Damian, that the whole HOA, especially for condos, this is where we're seeing people on fixed incomes, typically seniors in condos, who are getting hit with thousands of dollar assessments because of a significant increase in terms of property insurance. So the condo insurance and HOA is a huge issue. The Commissioner of Insurance, Mike Conway, is aware of this. We keep beating this drum of we've got to find ways to make sure that we have a private insurance market, a robust, competitive private insurance market, because we need them. Now, that said, there is a public insurer piece coming on board it's supposed to be actually 2025, 2026, called the FAIR Plan. It is truly an insurer of last resort. So as you're working with people throughout the whole real estate purchasing process, there is that you have to have been denied by a private insurer. You may get hit with a premium increase or renewal of something that's significantly more, thousands more. But as long as they're offering that coverage out there, you cannot go to the FAIR Plan and put in sort of basically a request for funding or coverage through the FAIR Plan out there. The FAIR Plan is capped. It is capped in terms of payouts at $750,000. That's the maximum claim out there. Premiums have not been established yet. Premiums are going to be astronomically high. So this is not a competitive solution. It is supposed to be a stopgap measure out there. And it was purposely designed to not be like some states like Florida, which the insurer of last resort actually became very competitive with the private market, to the point now where it's about 80% of the market is Citizen in the state of Florida out there. Again, fun topics. Let's continue. Property taxes and classifications. So again, short-term
believe it or not, I think this group enjoys this stuff. So Good. You're okay.
Good. Because ready or not, here it comes. There is actually, again, multiple bills around short-term rentals. Huge topic. And property taxes. So property taxes with the repeal of Gallagher, obviously we had the wild swing last year, again, 40% on average across the board. So there's been these stopgap pieces every year around property taxes. I will get into one of the bills that we supported and worked on around property taxes. And I will also talk about short-term rentals and more the why around why short-term rentals also becoming a statewide legislative issue out there. The other thing too, and this is something that is actually looking ahead to 2025, construction litigation reform really around condo development. We have, obviously, there's a lot of projects around multifamily rental property, residential properties out there, but we are not seeing nearly the development for, again, condos and development, especially in price points that are below $500,000. So this is either starter homes for people to get into the market and have a first property, or for people to downsize. It is just a missing chunk of the sector and market right now. That is, part of it is because of the cost of litigation is forcing developers and builders to get RAP insurance because of the potential of some sort of code violation or out there that would then trigger a Colorado Consumer Protection Act claim with trouble damages. So the risk of litigation and the associated legal cost is driving it up from an insurance standpoint before you even get to live in those properties out there. So that is something we have been working on with the Home Ownership Opportunity Alliance, builders, and a whole host of other groups, the Associated General Contractors, to crack that nut as to what is that piece that, again, we want people to have safe properties to live in. Absolutely. At the same time, there's some folks out there that are going after certain pieces and adding on code violations that don't actually affect the integrity or structure of a condo. But at the same time, we're getting added in terms of claims and damages that's driving up the cost for all of us, for the whole market. Okay. Again, I mentioned 97 bills, 705. If you want to see the 97 bills, this is your website. Any of you can share this with clients, customers, the general public. We are transparent. You will see the position that we have on any bill of the 97 for this year. And again, the position that you will see is the most recent. So there are some bills on here that we were in an amend position that we are now monitoring because we got the key amendments to get us to a kind of stand down position on a bill. So just know, like, we didn't start in some of these positions. In fact, I'm gonna highlight a bill that we opposed it before we supported it. And it was more about timing than anything else. All right. I am not going to kill you on all of these bills because again, these bills, many of them are several pages, 40, 50 pages in length. You get the Cliff Notes version. And if you want more, obviously you can go to the bill tracker, read all about the bills. If you need help falling asleep at night, I cannot stress, pick out any one of these bills and just have a nice leisurely read. And I think you will find yourself gravitating towards sleep very quickly. So again,
you know, for anybody that is interested in some of these bills, if you go on the Colorado Legislature's website, they have a digest available that kind of breaks down kind of the gist of what it is that helps kind of understand basically what they did, even though it doesn't go into the nitty gritty. But I always find that very helpful to find out if I need to actually read the bill or just look at the digest.
Don't worry, Damian. I'm happy to help you. Being like, there's this bill. I need your eyes on it.
I've read several of these. Yes, I'm aware.
So again, I'm always a helpful friend, being like, I need extra eyes of assistance on this one. Here's the whole thing. Again, look, this is truly a partnership where we're all, because when you have thousands of pages, and again, words matter. I mean, individual words, whether it's something that's in there or not in there, it's always good to have fresh eyes and a fresh perspective in terms of these pieces. I'm gonna, again, as you're looking at your screen and you're seeing these things, a lot of these sound great. I can't tell you, like, the naming of bills is like, you know, how could you be against some of these things out there? But let me just give you a snapshot. House Bill 1300 was a bill that we opposed. And we were able to defeat this bill by working with the Democratic majority to essentially defeat this when it made its way over to the Senate. Look, we understand and we absolutely acknowledge that, again, homes need to do a better job around wildfire mitigation. Whether it's home hardening, whether it's, again, being smart in terms of space around a property out there, like we can do more, especially as we're looking at communities that are in high wildfire risk areas out there. This solution was the wrong solution, and we were clear on that. This would have required a person at the point of sale to, again, have a certification from the county that their vegetation was properly mitigated on their property. So you could not have a buyer come in and you could not close on a sale until you had a county certification provided that, yes, this property was properly mitigated for vegetation. I'm going to stress that piece, not home hardening, just simply around vegetation out there.
That wouldn't have caused any kind of delays or any kind of hardship on sellers that were in financial distress or any hardship on, that would have been a great bill.
Look, everyone knows this. Again, the acquisition of property is not a simple, straightforward process. There are multiple pieces and points along the way. This would add a certification process where, again, think about our communities up in mountain communities or anywhere in the state where, again, you're trying to sell a property in January. And you've got to have an arborist come out to a property to remove vegetation in January when you're under 6 feet of snow. You might be waiting months to actually get the vegetation removed during the winter months out there. And all that does is slow up the whole process and, again, completely mess up the market. That's one point. The point that we stress through and through, and we were very clear about this, is that Okay, great. You've done all of the right things. Your property, you've now been officially certified by the county for wildfire mitigation. You can proceed with this sale. It does not guarantee a buyer property coverage. It does not require insurance. So great, you're certified, but you may not get insurance coverage. That's problematic. I would be clear too, we did not advocate to mandate it. Again, we need private insurers in the market. We did not say like that was not the solution that we were looking for. We were like, there's other ways around this piece. If you are a seller and you have a number of trees or something that would be very expensive to like remove out there and you couldn't afford it, you could have the 150% of the estimated cost put into an escrow account. And then that could go towards the actual cost of mitigation out there. And again, it was never clear as to like, well, then who, if there's money remaining over, who gets paid out? Where are funds dispersed from this escrow account? Does it go to the buyer, back to the lender? Who actually benefits from this? None of those questions were answered out there. Now, those pieces were stripped out, and I will say counties lobbied for this for as enabling legislation to allow them to do this on a county by county basis. We still oppose this. The last thing we need is 64 different contracts where you could have certification in Jefferson County, but not Douglas County versus Clear Creek or Gilpin or Park. So we were able to defeat this bill. I'll put that. I'm going to skip ahead to House Bill 1024. Look, we have been supportive of efforts around education, working with the State Forest Service in terms of outreach about slash program, slash removal, or just in terms of having a safe space around your home. It does not mean you need to remove every single tree from your property if you live in a mountain community. But we are supportive of those education efforts rather than the mandate efforts of certification driving up the cost of housing that we saw in 1300. Damian, flashbacks to 1014. Again, deceptive trade practice, significant impact scenario. It sounds great. Again, you read that title like it's a no-brainer. What this bill actually would do.
Yeah, this is a disaster. I mean, this is the second year in a row that you guys were able to help defeat this thing. I mean, this thing is terrible.
This again, the bill titles don't do justice in terms of the impact. All right. So again, everybody with the license covers has errors and omissions insurance out there in terms of the pieces. Things happen. So this affects in terms of claims regarding to the Colorado Consumer Protection Act as a deceptive or unfair trade practice. So it's a higher thing where you're talking trouble damages. You're talking, again, your E&O insurance doesn't cover anything that's considered a deceptive or trade practice for that claim standpoint. But what this actually does is currently there's got to be a significant public impact standard, which means essentially multiple people for it to rise to the level of a CCPA claim. This bill would have lowered that threshold to one. One person could bring a claim and then be like, oh, that actually goes beyond that one person. It is now a significant impact for the whole public based upon a single claim. And again, this would be a boon for trial attorneys and other folks out there. But obviously, from a market standpoint, it would drive up the cost of housing. Litigation and those costs don't just magically disappear. They get added into all of the sort of financial transactions out there. Look, we're expecting this to come back. So Damian, again, be prepared. But I think the thing is, though, there's got to be a number that's far greater than one. And so what is that number? But again, one cannot be that number. But I know and have
I honestly don't think the system's broken. I mean, we already have case law that identifies when the deceptive trade practice is applicable and when it's not. And all this is a bunch of plaintiffs' lawyers trying to find new ways of suing professionals, which isn't just you guys. It's the accountants and the lawyers and the doctors and the electricians and the plumbers and it's everybody. I mean, it's crazy to me.
Thank you for bringing that up. Again, the amount of industries touched by this was widespread. And again, I would say the medical field was by far and away, again, think about the impact in terms of like care and coverage when you've got people who are concerned about the litigation aspect, because again, one person could bring forward a Colorado Consumer Protection Act claim based upon one instance.
And it's always been consumer protection. I mean, it has to be a public impact, which is the whole thing that they're trying to They're trying to change the language so that it means it has to be reinterpreted by the courts. That's the whole point of this bill.
100%. We're gonna be facing this again. So just know that this is something that we have fought to do. Damian has been heavily involved. Scott's been heavily involved from CAR for our general counsel. So this is something that you all should just be aware of. And again, if we are doing calls for action, which I'll touch on here, a couple more slides, then just know that the piece. I'm going to quickly move through a couple more short-term rentals. So the Senate Bill 33 is the big one that would have really messed up the market, because if you used a property for 90 or more nights as a short-term rental, it would be reclassified as a commercial lodging property. So think about that from a lending aspect. Like, you have a house in a neighborhood that's a residential neighborhood that has now been tagged and assessed as commercial lodging. We didn't even get to the point where it's like, how do you even get lending for a property that's now been classified as commercial, but it's a house in a residential zone neighborhood out there. But again, that's the magic. So again, from a property tax, from an owner standpoint, your property taxes would be 4 times as much at the 27% in change rate versus 6.7%. And you would have communities completely go dark, where that threshold for 90 nights, it would be strictly during peak seasons, especially in mountain communities. Mud, shoulder seasons, you would not see Coloradans traveling to great parts of the state when they're not as heavily occupied from out-of-staters. So whole host of things. We did run a bill, CAR, Realtors, we did proactively run a bill to kind of counteract that. That's House Bill 1299. It would have exempted out the primary and secondary residents from any sort of short-term rentals pieces. People will usually will lose their mind right there. Like, how could you, propose and support this? In many ways, it was to counteract 33. It couldn't be the sole conversation piece. And we didn't actually very clearly define as to, an owner. Is that a personal? Is that an LLC? Is that a trust? So that was open-ended, I think, really sort of just to have the conversation going. But we needed 2 pieces of the conversation to kind of keep going. So it wasn't solely focused on that first bill around the number of nights, but making about the number of properties. Now, I'm happy to say that both of these bills were defeated. We were able to defeat 1014 and House Bill 1300 by working with Republicans and Democrats to come together to find that middle in terms of hey, look, these aren't the best solutions out there. We talked about 1024. Senate Bill 111 is a temporary 2-year sort of homestead exemption for folks that don't quite qualify for the homestead. But for tax years 25 and 26, there is a senior primary residence property tax reduction similar to homestead. Senate Bill 233, the property tax. This is an interesting one. It passed. We supported it because we were able to knock out some harmful provisions around benefiting both a primary or owner-occupied residence versus a other residential property. So if you had a short-term rental or even a long-term rental, you may not get any tax benefits, only if it was owner-occupied or primary residence. That has been very problematic for us in terms of starting to create that differentiation in terms of residential property. It also does some other things. One of the things that we were able to get Republicans on board working with us is that, unlike Prop HH last year, it does not touch Tabor. There's no Tabor backfill component to local governments about reduced property tax. The other key piece is that there's actually no state backfill really, period, unless a county's facing a truly negative reduction in revenue based upon the changes in property tax. There's a number of legislators who, again, some love or hate, are like, look, if the state is enacting policy that affects property taxes, which is a local revenue source, the state shouldn't then be backfilling their decisions using state dollars. And so this is to cut that fine line of this is a local revenue, local decision. If the state's going to touch it, the state needs to own and not backfill in terms of that component. More to become on 233. It does not take effect, just so you all know. Senate Bill 233 will not take effect unless 2 ballot initiatives, 50 and 108, which will be on the ballot most likely in November, if those fail. There's a amendment that got put on that. Look, 1098, 94, we talked about tenant landlord. I'm actually going to move into the next slide to just show you the work of an amendment. So these bills were very long, very intense. But if you look at the bill as introduced versus the final bill that passed, this is how you can kind of see where that amendment process takes hold. When House Bill 10,
it's important to understand this thing was going to pass in some form, no matter what you guys did. This thing was passing. So the fact that you got some amendments made a huge difference.
Damian, that's exactly it. When this bill got introduced, there was at least 25 Democrats on the introduced version. They did a press conference. The House Majority Leader was a sponsor of the bill. That's from the getting out of the gate. And again, pop quiz, what's the number for the House?
33.
So your starting point already is you've already got 25 people who put their name on the bill as a sponsor. You only need 8 more to pass it. And it was the same way in the Senate too. So the writing was on the wall. This bill is going. We talked to the governor's office. The governor's office was like, depending on what comes out, like they were not being like from the get-go, like we're gonna veto this out there. They also got amendments. So the governor's office worked on some amendments as well, which aren't exactly on the slide, but this bill changed significantly. But just think of that first one, that first bullet up there. Whether people are property managers or landlords out there, it didn't matter. If any of our realtors had a client or customer who had a property that was a rental unit, they could be facing having to pay their tenant 2 or 3 months of rent for relocating them. So say like, hey, we want to put our property on the market to sell, and we then would trigger this relocation or just cause sort of payment. Incredibly harmful. And look, one of the things I always say this is a horrible, no good, very bad bill that, again, drove people nuts. But there wasn't a pathway to get to 33, 18, or 1. And therefore, we had to engage to make a really bad bill at least not as damaging. And that relocation assistance was a huge component. You also had these time frames where a unit could be just vacant on the back end of a sale for like potentially 90 days. So this is where we know things change, life changes out there. It can re-enter the rental market after just even 1 day on the MLS pieces. Things about notice, things that would be incredibly complex out there. I will say this bill passed, it's in law. Damian mentioned about litigation. Like, look, there's got to be, case law is really going to dictate the impact of House Bill 1098 and what's commonly known as just cause eviction or no fault eviction out there. But the thing out there, and again, there are other folks that can speak more specifically to this if you're a property manager or a landlord, is that the whole thing about non-renewing a tenant has essentially gone away. You now need some reason to change that contract piece out there. Now, look, you can still increase rent. There's no rent control. You can still, again, provide a tenant like, hey, I'm increasing rent based upon all the market and services and things that have changed with the property out there. Like, so that's in there, and they can choose to non-renew. Like the tenant can choose, but the whole non-renewal coming from a landlord has essentially gone away. And that's something that the apartment association, I think, flags time and time again. We know it. We absolutely do everything we can to preserve property rights. This bill definitely impedes and treads on that like no other. Again, I'm gonna quickly go through because I know we're at 2:47. I'm sure there might be a question or two. This is, again, bill sounds great. Safe housing for residential tenants. Who could go wrong with that? This is really around the warranty of habitability and expanding that, putting new things in terms of what's a breach of habitability and giving tenants like far more sort of reach in terms of legal tools if they felt there was a breach of habitability. I mean, you can see what's kind of on the page there, but I want to share the one thing that was, I think, front and center. Was this bill introduced? One was a verbal notice, where you have these timelines and triggers around a verbal notice. How do you track a verbal notice? And it may not be in English. It could be in any other language out there. It wasn't clear about any of these things. That was one of the first things that we had struck. Has to be in writing to trigger these timelines and clocks regarding basically taking care of some sort of habitability issue out there. So, and that was for the proponents, they wanted verbal very, very badly. The other thing is about withholding of rent. If a tenant felt there was a breach, they could just stop paying rent. And there could have been law regarding just withhold rent until it's taken care of and addressed. Obviously, it puts a landlord in a really bad position if they're actually trying to address and fix the work, if they're not, again, having a tenant withholding rent. But it also just leads to litigation. I mean, it was just an automatic trigger to this to go to the courts. And the boon would be for attorneys out there that would love this stuff. We got all of that removed. So again, a lot of sections removed out there, and I'll just go with the kind of the key amendments. Oh, so withholding of rent, notices in writing, exempting out for the cooling spaces out there, and then the capping the number of hotel nights. So even for current law, past law now, I guess, because this is also passed, this happened, is that if you had an issue where you, again, had to put a tenant up in the same sort of space that you were providing before, whether it's a hotel room with a kitchen or some other property, there was no cap for anybody. So whether it was a small mom and pop or a large landlord, it didn't matter. This caps it at 60 days, and it serves as the end of a lease agreement.
One thing on that before you move on,
Yeah.
if I remember right, the bill requires like email addresses or something for notice for the warranty of habitability and some other things. And because of these two bills, if you are a landlord, you're going to have to get a new lease starting January 1st. You should go talk to a lawyer, not me, for the love of God, not me. But you're going to need to get a new lease put in place for January 1st, any leases you enter into after January 1st. I just want, as a practical matter, for you guys to let the landlords know that.
Completely agree. And again, one of the things some people will do a month to month. And I think this is really going to reinforce. And again, everyone should talk to their appropriate legal counsel about this. But I think we will see from a market standpoint, a more 1 year, like 12 months, and there's like a renewal. There's not going to be rolling month to month afterwards, because you still have these timelines and triggers regardless. And that's going back to the tenant landlord for just cause. And you'll have a lot of these triggers for timing on these bills.
Yeah, I think we're going to see 11-month leases for the start with, because the for cause eviction stuff, and then rolling into 1 years after that, because once you renew them. But talk to your lawyer, guys. If you're landlords or your clients are landlords, tell them to talk to a lawyer, because this space has just changed so significantly over the years, and there's some pretty big changes this year as well, as you can see.
So that was a fun-filled tour through just some of the fun bills that we worked on. There's a whole host of other ones. Again, take a look at our bill sheet. You can see all the ones that we engaged on. But I am going to say that we are working to change our political reality. And this goes back to June, to the primary elections. And again, we pride ourselves on like not being tied to either folks, but working in that middle space about who is going to be good for real estate, the industry, housing overall, and property rights. We got involved in 16 primary sort of elections, 8 Republicans, 8 Democrats. For the most part, these were like safe seats. So the winner of the primary is likely to be, whether the Republican is likely to be the nominee. Same thing for the Democratic seats.
Yeah. Can I tell you how happy I was to see that Michael Carter made your list?
Michael Carter, his realtor, is on our legislative policy committee, knows him really well. In fact, we were doing the interview, Kimmy. Michael Carter was laughing, being like, "I know you," and talked about his experience. So,
Oh, your Michael Carter knew Michael Carter that's running?
Michael Carter for House District 36 knew his realtor was on the interview panel, and he wasn't expecting him to see him on the interview panel with us back in late May. So,
oh, that's fantastic! I love that.
it was a comical sort of moment, being like, "I know you." Look, let me just share this, and I won't go through every single race because we've got limited time left here. But we were successful on 13 of 16. And I will say this for both on the Republican side and the Democratic side. These candidates understand the political composition and are going to work and try to find that middle moderate path on both sides. Again, for the folks that you see on your screen here, we're looking for people on either side that was going to completely ostracize, whether, again, on the Republican ranks or Democratic ranks, that they were solely going to focus just on their caucus alone. So for Democrats, we asked about them reaching out across the aisle, and they are going to do a better job of that. Republicans are also going to like, look, we know we're in the minority, but we're going to try to do what we can to work on amendments to make bills better or get our bills passed. So that's who you see is a move to the middle in terms of those bold names. You've got folks that we knocked out some incumbents. I mean, it's a big thing. Representative Tim Hernandez in House District 4 was knocked off in a very safe Democratic seat. Representative Elizabeth Epps in House District 6 was knocked off in a very safe seat. We were able to support some incumbents, if you see on the Senate district side, that faced primary challenges that were good on our issues. So Lisa Frizzell, looking to move from the House to the Senate, Larry Liston, Barb Kirkmeyer, faced challenges within their own party for some of the compromises that they were able to work out under the dome. Huge. What you see on your screen is your RPAC dollars at work. For those of you who invest in RPAC, again, we have 26,000 realtors across the state. The turnout for the primary election was only 26%, so very low turnout, but that's still 1 million ballots cast out there. RPAC allows us to communicate outside of our family, outside of people who know anything about real estate or the housing sector, but people should know where these folks stand on rent control, around property rights, around housing. We're the only group that was able to communicate with a larger audience of folks to share like, hey, this candidate would be good for maybe more development, more housing, more attainable housing out there. So RPAC allows us to pull these resources together to then communicate out to a larger universe about housing, real estate, property rights issue. The best thing about it is realtors make that decision. I know some of you, I myself have contributed directly to a candidate. When you give money to a candidate, you get no say as to how that money's spent. Here you go. If you want to spend it on t-shirts or pins or yard signs, have at it. Or if they want to spend it on an issue that you don't care about, that they care about, you can't sort of drive that. RPAC is controlled by realtors. We only communicate on issues of importance to us, again, around housing, real estate sector, property rights. So we control the message, we dictate that. Those are all, I think, key pieces. And that truly is your RPAC. It helps us reach out to the general public who don't know squat sometimes about the housing market to communicate with them. More to come. I'm not going to get into the ballot measure piece because there's more to come on 15-108. 108 just turned in about 200,000 signatures. We do expect it to be on the ballot. I will just share with you, there are continuing conversations around these measures. There's always been talk around a special session. Who knows? Maybe not. It depends on who you talk to and the day of the week and the time. But for now, these are most likely to be on the ballot, but that could change. They have to make this decision really kind of by Labor Day. That's when we have overseas voters, CAVA voters, but there are still conversations, so the ballot could change. All right, big close. What can you do if real estate is your profession and then politics is your business? I'm gonna flip this thing around. You may not care about politics or politicians, but they care about you and they care about your industry and sector. There are 100 legislators under the dome, 65 in the House, 35 in the Senate. Not a single one of them is a current licensee, and not a single one is a realtor. So you've got people who don't really maybe know about the practical impact of the decisions they're making, but that's not stopping anybody from engaging in housing, real estate, property rights on those issues out there. So sorry, I know people hate politics. I mentioned I'm a lobbyist at parties and people run away. It's totally fine. I get it. My wife works in insurance. We are a hit at parties all the time. We talk to, all these pieces out there. We do realtor party mobile alerts. I'm sure some of you have been getting texts from campaigns every day, 5 times a day. That's not from us. If you text realtors to 30644, you will only get information from us. We control it. We don't sell those lists. It's strictly internal between NAR and CAR. Obviously, I think I'm supposed to swap this out. This is an old presentation, but if you didn't vote, you can still update your voter registration for the general election. So Go Vote Colorado is where you can go and update your voter registration or just simply register to vote. It's the Secretary of State site. Building relationships with elected officials. Now is the time to do that. You may really love your local state legislator, both state rep or state senator. You may hate them. You may really dislike them. You should still engage with them no matter what, whether you love them and you think you agree on everything, or you think that you don't have anything in common. They need to know. Nobody has the experience that you have in terms of complexity or in terms of what the market looks like. So you've got to share those experiences and build those relationships now before we really need them come January. So that's a key piece. And again, the RPAC investor piece is so critical. It allows us to educate a much larger universe. We're talking about potentially, 2.5, 3 million ballots cast. come this November, they should know about how things are going to affect the real estate industry and market. Please reach out. Gov Affairs is our sort of catch-all. Again, we have multiple eyes on that sort of email box out there. We're on social media in various ways and matters. But again, I'm going to go to my very first slide. Jay Brown, our realtor from Smedra, obviously is our vice president for the remainder of 2024. Janet Marlowe will likely be, I think, coming in for 2025. So again, those are some folks to reach out to as well.
I think that was great. Brian, I mean, if somebody has questions, maybe they could throw some up there for real quick. I answered a couple of them just because I wasn't sure how far you were going to get on your 13 slides when we were 30 minutes in. So, but yeah, if anybody has some questions, if you want to ask them, do it right now.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen just because it helps me see like chat or anything else out there.
Yeah, that was an excellent presentation, Brian. It was so clear and just so well done. Thank you. And what incredible work you guys did in a challenging political environment.
The numbers will likely be pretty close to the same going to 2025, but we're trying to change the who within those numbers. And I think even starting with the primaries, it's an ongoing process, which again, our PICA allows us to talk about candidates that are endorsed because they are going to work in that middle about how do we actually unlock the condo market? How do we actually protect property rights? And how do we make sure that we have insurance coverage across the state?
Well, I think you may have covered everything. Oh, wait, we got a couple.
Just nice comments. Awesome, good info, awesome presentation. Thanks, guys. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Brian, thank you. That was really exceptional. We really appreciate you and your time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you next month for our next industry update. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your week.
Thanks, Brian.